When we talk about what Ethiopia has achieved, we must begin with the part of the story that shocked the world the most. They built Africa's biggest dam without a single dollar of foreign money. Not a loan, not an IMF package, not a World Bank condition, not a European guarantee, nothing. And that alone challenges the entire global system that has, for decades, convinced African nations that greatness is impossible without borrowing. Ethiopia proved that this lease has expired. They proved that when a nation believes deeply in its own future, its people become the investors, the lenders, the donors, and the guardians of that future. And this is something every African must reflect on, because it shows a completely different path to development, one we were told could never work. When Ethiopia first announced the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, many outside the continent laughed. They said a project of this scale, more than 5,000 megawatts, miles of concrete complex engineering, was simply too big for an African nation to do alone. They said Ethiopia would eventually crawl back to foreign lenders, begging bowl in hand. But instead, the Ethiopian people did something no economic theory could predict. They opened their hearts and their wallets. Taxi drivers bought bonds. Teachers donated from their salaries. Diaspora communities sent money from abroad. Farmers contributed the little they had with pride. Students gave coins because they believed even the smallest contribution carried the weight of a nation's dignity. This was not charity. This was ownership. It was the people saying, "This dam will be our legacy, and no one will control it except us." And that decision changed everything. Once a nation declares that it will build with its own hands, something powerful happens. The narrative shifts. Suddenly, Western financial institutions lose their leverage. Suddenly, global powers cannot dictate conditions. Ethiopia refused to accept a future where they must apologize for using their own water. That refusal became a political statement, a cultural rebirth, and an economic revolution at the same time. The dam was no longer just concrete. It became a symbol of African sovereignty. You could almost feel the spirit of the continent rising with every meter the dam climbed. What made this even more remarkable was the discipline behind it. Ethiopia didn't make this decision because it was easy. They made it because it was necessary. When the world tried to pressure them, when threats were made, when diplomatic storms arrived, the people's commitment only grew stronger. They stood behind their engineers. They defended the project in international forums. They protected their right to development. And they proved that unity is a force more powerful than any loan or aid package. Imagine ordinary citizens waking up every day knowing that their small sacrifice was helping generate electricity for millions. Imagine a mother telling her child, "I contributed to that dam," and the child growing up with the belief that their nation is capable of greatness. That kind of confidence is priceless. This is what foreign money cannot buy. National pride strong enough to build a mega project brick by brick. And this is the lesson Africa must learn. Ethiopia showed that we do not need to wait for approval. We do not need to beg for funds. We do not need lectures on development from those who grew wealthy by extracting from us. We only need unity, vision, and courage. And once we decide to build something for ourselves, we must protect it fiercely, just as Ethiopia protected this dam. So when we celebrate the GERD, we are not just celebrating an engineering masterpiece. We are celebrating a mindset that says Africa can fund its own future. A mindset that says development without dependency is possible. A mindset that says a nation's greatness is born from its people, not from foreign financiers. Ethiopia has lit a torch for the entire continent. The question now is, who will follow this path next? When we look at how Ethiopia built this dam, we must understand that it wasn't simply a structure rising from the earth. It was a nation pushing against every obstacle, every doubt, and every attempt to stop its progress. This project became a living example of what happens when people decide that their future will not be dictated by outside forces. Every brick, every bolt, every turbine installed carries the fingerprints of Ethiopians who refuse to give up. And what makes this achievement so extraordinary is not just the final product, but the journey that led to it. A journey filled with engineering brilliance, national sacrifice, and unwavering determination. From the very beginning, Ethiopia knew the road would not be easy. Building the largest hydroelectric dam in Africa demands technology, expertise and coordination on a scale many countries never experience. But Ethiopians didn't shy away from the challenge. Their engineers stepped forward, their scientists contributed their knowledge, and their workers prepared themselves for years of construction ahead. The site became not just a workplace, but a symbol of national duty. It was a place where citizens from every background came together with one purpose: to prove that Africa can build greatness with its own hands. You could see this determination in the workers who spent days and nights on the site, sometimes in extreme heat, sometimes in harsh conditions, but never losing focus. Many of them were away from their families for months, sacrificing comfort so the country could gain power. Soldiers guarded the area, engineers monitored every detail, and planners worked around the clock to ensure the project moved forward, no matter what pressures surrounded it. This wasn't a government project. It was a people's project. It was Ethiopia's heartbeat poured into a single structure. And what made the story even more powerful was the political environment surrounding the dam. Ethiopia was building under immense international pressure. Countries tried to intimidate them, media narratives questioned their capabilities, and foreign governments attempted to interfere with the timeline. But every challenge only strengthened the resolve of the Ethiopian people. Instead of slowing down, they accelerated. Instead of doubting themselves, they became more confident. Instead of bending, they stood tall. You rarely see a nation so unified around one purpose. But Ethiopia demonstrated what unity truly means. Inside the engineering rooms, experts were designing systems that rivaled some of the best in the world. They worked closely with local universities, trained hundreds of young engineers, and turned the project into a massive national learning experience. Many of the young people who joined the project had never worked on anything of this scale before. But by the end, they were operating machinery, running simulations, performing inspections, and mastering skills that will serve Ethiopia for generations. GERD didn't just generate electricity, it generated talent. The project became a national classroom, a place where knowledge was not imported, but grown. And this is one of the most overlooked parts of Ethiopia's success. They didn't just build a dam, they built confidence, expertise, and a professional class capable of leading future mega projects. This is why nations that rely heavily on foreign contractors often remain dependent. Ethiopia chose a different route. The dam became a foundation for training, empowerment, and self-sufficiency. As construction reached its major phases, you could feel something changing in the country. For the first time, Ethiopians saw with their own eyes that they were capable of achieving the impossible. And this feeling transformed into a powerful national spirit. In schools, children drew pictures of the dam. In markets, people discussed the progress. In villages and cities alike, the GERD became a symbol of hope, proof that Ethiopia, and Africa as a whole, does not need to wait for permission to develop. There were moments when the world predicted Ethiopia would stop. There were moments when sanctions and diplomatic pressure intensified, but Ethiopia refused to bow. They continued pouring concrete, installing turbines, and raising the structure higher day after day. And when the first turbines finally generated power, supplying electricity to millions of households, the sound of those rotating blades was more than energy. It was victory. It was the sound of a nation declaring that no amount of pressure could take away its right to development. And this is what makes Ethiopia's achievement so unique. They didn't just overcome technical challenges, they overcame political, economic, and psychological ones. They showed that a nation's destiny is not written by foreign institutions, but by its people. And as the dam stands tall today, it speaks a message that echoes across Africa. If Ethiopians can build the biggest dam on the continent with no foreign money, then there is nothing Africans cannot build when they stand united, determined, and free from external control. When Ethiopia finally moved from the planning phase into the actual construction of the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, the real challenge wasn't the engineering. It was the storm of geopolitical pressure that came crashing from every direction. Building the biggest dam in Africa without foreign money was already a bold statement. But trying to do it while powerful nations, institutions, and global partners warned Ethiopia to stop, made the task even more extraordinary. And this is where the story becomes even more compelling, because what Ethiopia achieved in this phase wasn't just about building a dam, it was about holding its ground, shaping its identity, and proving that African nations can control their own future even when the world disagrees. As construction began, pressure quickly intensified. Western governments raised concerns. Global financial institutions refused support. Some neighboring countries warned that the project threatened regional stability. International media repeatedly predicted that the dam would fail, insisting Ethiopia lacked the capacity, the money, and the political unity to pull off a project of such scale. But instead of backing down, Ethiopians doubled their determination. The very resistance that was meant to discourage them became the motivation that pushed the project forward. The government's message to the world was simple and firm. Ethiopia had the right to use its own natural resources for its own people. And unlike most large infrastructure projects across the continent, this one did not depend on foreign lenders who could use funding as leverage. The decision to rely on internal financing meant that Ethiopia did not need to compromise, negotiate, or delay construction every time external donors shifted their opinions. This independence created a sense of national unity that few countries have ever experienced around a development project. It became a symbol of dignity, a symbol of progress, and for many Ethiopians, a symbol of Africa rising. As international pressure grew, people within Ethiopia responded by investing even more into the dam. Families who had very little contributed what they could. Workers volunteered long hours. Engineers proudly took on roles that foreign contractors usually held. And in every region, the dam became more than concrete and turbines. It became a matter of national honor. Suddenly, finishing the GERD wasn't just about electricity. It was about proving that Ethiopia could achieve something historic without bending to global pressure. And while this was happening internally, Ethiopia was learning how to manage its external challenges with strategy, diplomacy, and resilience. Each time international warnings intensified, Ethiopian negotiators calmly reiterated their legal right to harness Blue Nile waters, reminding the world that the country had never signed any treaty that denied its access to the river. They emphasized that the dam would not harm downstream nations and that electricity, not water diversion, was the real goal. Slowly, global narratives began to shift. What was once called a dangerous project was now being recognized as a monumental engineering achievement, and Ethiopia's refusal to surrender became admired instead of criticized. On the ground, construction continued through political transitions, economic challenges, and moments of instability. Multiple governments came and went, but the dam remained a unifying force. Even during periods of internal conflict, Ethiopians on all sides viewed the completion of the GERD as a national duty. And despite predictions that political instability would halt progress, each stage of construction moved forward steadily. Foundation work, concrete placement, turbine installation, filling of the reservoir. Each milestone proved what many outside Africa still struggle to understand, that African nations are not weak, that they do not need permission to develop, and that they are capable of executing massive, world-class projects entirely on their own terms. And when Ethiopia finally began generating electricity, it wasn't just a technological triumph, it was a diplomatic victory. It signaled to the world that sovereignty, when defended with unity and clarity, can withstand even the strongest geopolitical winds. It showed that a nation with limited financial resources but unlimited determination can push back against pressure, media narratives, and political interference. And it gave millions of Africans a reason to believe that development doesn't always require foreign lenders, foreign corporations, or foreign approval. In the end, the GERD stands not just as a power plant, but as a declaration that Ethiopia refused to be intimidated, that Africans can build African solutions, and that when a nation chooses pride, unity, and self-reliance, no amount of global pressure can stop its progress.